Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became Gotham's brightest hero instead of its darkest night. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The air in Ground Gamma was thick with the familiar, metallic scent of controlled demolitions and the faint, sweet aroma of Aries candy apple. Izuku Midoriya, clad in his battered but beloved Gamma costume, took a deep, steadying breath. One for all thrummed beneath his skin, a contained tempest of green lightning that danced over his limbs. It felt like holding a live wire in every cell of his body, a sensation he was finally learning to command rather than endure. Ready, Deku? He looked down, a warm smile gracing his features. Aerie stood beside him, her small hand clutching a corner of his cape. Her single horn, once a source of terror, now gleamed like polished ivory in the training ground's artificial sunlight. She wore a miniature UA tracksuit and a determined expression that mimicked his own mentor's. Ready as I'll ever be, Aerie-chan, he replied, ruffling her silvery hair. Mr. Aizawa, are the sensors calibrated? From a reinforced observation booth, Shota Aizawa's voice crackled through the comms in Deku's ear. They are, Midoriya. The goal is subtlety. We need to see if you can use one for all for delicate extraction, not just demolition. The target is the practice dummy trapped under the 5-ton concrete slab. Your objective is to lift the slab just enough to pull the dummy free without shattering the slab or crushing the target. Aerie is your safety net. If you feel your output spike beyond 80%, she has my permission to engage. I'll be careful, Aerie chirped, her red eyes focused. Her rewind quirk, once a cataclysmic force, had become a tool of incredible precision under careful tutelage. She was here as the ultimate emergency stop, capable of rewinding Deku's body a few seconds if his power threatened to shatter his bones again. It was a testament to their shared trust. All right, Deku muttered, his analytical mind kicking into high gear. Subtlety, finesse. I can't just use a smash. I need a sustained, controlled lift, like weight training. But the weight is a city block and the barbell is made of glass. He crouched, planting his iron-soled boots firmly on the ground. Green energy coiled around him. He activated full cowling at 45%, the baseline he could now maintain without straying. He then layered FA Gene, building kinetic energy by repeating subtle motions, feeling the power storing in his muscles like a compressed spring. Black whip tendrils, dark and sleek, snaked from his arms and wrapped around the edges of the massive concrete slab, providing additional anchor points. Okay, easy does it, he began to pull, his muscles screaming as he channeled one for all into a steady, upward force. The slab groaned. Dust trickled from its cracked surface. The sensors Aizawa mentioned lit up on a monitor in the booth, showing Deku's power output climbing steadily. 50%. 55%. 60%. It was working. The slab was lifting, slowly, an inch at a time. The space beneath it was just wide enough now. That was when the world went sideways. A shrill, tearing sound, like reality being ripped like paper, echoed from the edge of the training ground. A figure stumbled out from behind a ruined skyscraper prop. A man in a cheap, theatrical costume covered in jagged lines. He clutched his side, bleeding from a wound Deku hadn't inflicted. Villain intrusion! Aizawa's voice was sharp, urgent. Midoriya, stand down! Protect Aerie! But the villain, a C-lister named Fisher whose quirk allowed him to create micro-rifts in space, was panicking. He saw the colossal slab suspended in midair by a terrifyingly powerful hero in training and reacted on pure instinct. He threw his hands out, and the space between him and Deku warped. The air shimmered, bending like a heat haze. The slab in Deku's grasp suddenly felt 10 times heavier as a spatial distortion field enveloped it. His power output, already strained, skyrocketed to compensate. 75%! Aizawa yelled. Deku! Aerie cried out, her fear acting as a catalyst. Her horn began to glow with a brilliant, golden light. It was the perfect, catastrophic storm. 3 wildly different, reality-altering forces colliding in a single instant. Deku's raw, kinetic power of one for all. Fisher's unstable, spatial warping quirk, and Aerie's burgeoning, time-reversing energy. The effect was instantaneous and violent. The air didn't just shimmer, it shattered. A vortex of emerald lightning, distorted purple energy, and radiant gold light erupted where Deku stood. It wasn't a portal, it was a wound in the world, screaming with impossible physics. Deku felt a pull, an absolute, irresistible force that dwarfed anything he had ever experienced. Black whip tendrils snapped. The concrete slab was pulverized into dust. He heard Eri scream his name, a sound that was stretched and distorted into a horrifying digital shriek. He saw Aizawa bursting from the observation booth, binding cloth lashing out uselessly. Then the vortex collapsed inward, taking him with it. The sensation was indescribable. It was the crushing pressure of the deepest ocean trench, the searing heat of a star, and the absolute zero of the void, all at once. His senses gave out. The voices of the past users of One for All screamed in his mind, not with words, but with pure, unadulterated shock. The world dissolved into a nauseating kaleidoscope of color and pain, and then, as suddenly as it began, it ended in a brutal, jarring impact. Darkness. Silence. Pain. Those were the first things Izuku Midoriya registered. His head throbbed with a migraine that felt like it was trying to split his skull. Every muscle ached, and a sharp, stinging pain radiated from his right shoulder and left knee, where his suit had been torn away, leaving raw, scraped skin. He pushed himself up with a groan, his vision swimming. The world resolved itself slowly, a study in shades of gray and black. He was in an alley. A disgustingly filthy alley. The ground beneath his gloves was slick with something he didn't want to identify. The air was a noxious cocktail of scents, rotting garbage, stagnant water, and a heavy, chemical smog that made his lungs burn. It was a stark, putrid contrast to the clean, controlled environment of UA. What happened?" he mumbled, the words feeling thick and clumsy in his mouth. "Ground Gamma." Eri, panic, cold and sharp, lanced through him. He fumbled for the calm unit in his ear. "Mr. Aizawa? All Might? Can anyone hear me? Eri-chan, are you okay?" Static. Dead, empty static was his only reply. He tapped it again, frantically. Nothing. His analytical mind, a lifelong coping mechanism, began to fight its way through the fog of pain and confusion. Okay, Izuku. Assess. Don't panic. Assess the situation. He took stock of his physical state. Battered, bruised, but no broken bones. One for All's residual energy was already knitting his minor wounds back together. His costume was a mess, the vibrant green fabric torn at the joints and smeared with grime. His mask was askew, and one of his armored knee pads was missing entirely. Next, his surroundings. The alley was a canyon of crumbling brick and rusted metal. Fire escapes clung precariously to the walls like skeletal fingers. A single, flickering neon sign from a distant building cast a sickly red glow on the perpetual gloom. Rain, or perhaps just a constant, greasy drizzle, what from a sky he couldn't see, collecting in puddles that reflected the darkness. The architecture was all wrong. It was older, more ornate, but also more decayed than anything in Muzidafu. The style was vaguely Western, American maybe, but twisted into a Gothic nightmare. This wasn't Japan. This wasn't even his world. The thought was so immense, so terrifying, that it almost paralyzed him. The spatial quirk, Ares rewind, they must have reacted in a way no one could have predicted, punching a hole through dimensions. He was alone. Truly, utterly alone. A choked sob escaped his lips. His mother. All Might. Uraraka. Ida. All of them, gone. He pressed a hand to his mouth, his shoulders shaking. For a moment, he allowed the despair to wash over him, the sheer, crushing weight of his predicament. He was a lost child in a world that felt fundamentally broken. The very air felt saturated with misery, a palpable aura of hopelessness that clung to him like the damp chill. But then, the voices of his predecessors whispered in his mind. Nana Shimura's unwavering smile. Daigoro Banjo's boisterous encouragement, and All Might's voice, forever etched into his soul. You can be a hero. He couldn't fall apart. Not here. Not now. He had to survive. He had to find a way back. And until he did, he was still a hero. He straightened his back, his expression hardening with a familiar, dogged determination. He adjusted his mask, took a deep breath of the polluted air, and stepped out of the shadows of the alley. The street was scarcely an improvement. Cracked pavements, boarded-up storefronts, and the skeletal remains of burnt-out cars lined the road. The few people he saw scurried from one pool of shadow to the next, heads down, shoulders hunched, as if afraid the very air would attack them. There was no laughter, no chatter. Only the distant, mournful wail of a siren, a sound that was deeper and more menacing than the ones he was used to. He started walking, trying to get his bearings, his mind racing. Language seems to be the same, or I'm understanding it somehow. That's a good sign. I need information. A map. A library. A police station. Something. His train of thought was severed by a sudden, sharp cry from a side street just ahead. Please, just take it. It's all I have. A woman's voice, high and thin with terror. It was followed by a man's gravelly laugh. Oh, we'll take it. But a pretty thing like you, working late? You owe the night a little tax. Izuku didn't think. He didn't hesitate. He reacted. Years of training took over. He channeled One for All, and the green lightning of full cowling flared to life, a sudden, vibrant supernova in the oppressive darkness. The light cast his shadow, long and heroic, against the grimy brick wall as he rounded the corner. The scene was a Gotham cliché made real. Two men, gaunt and wiry, had a woman pinned against the wall. One held a rusty knife to her throat, while the other rifled through her purse. The woman, dressed in nurse's scrubs, was weeping silently, her face a mask of pure terror. The thugs looked up, momentarily blinded by the emerald light. Their eyes widened, first in shock, then in derisive disbelief. The hell is this? The one with the knife snarled, squinting. What's with the get-up, kid? You lost on your way to a costume party? Izuku's heart hammered in his chest, not with fear, but with a righteous, burning anger. The sight of someone so helpless, so terrified, ignited the core of his being. Stop this! He yelled, his voice clear and strong. Leave her alone! The second thug pulled a cheap-looking handgun from his belt. You heard him, Marco. Circus clown wants to be a hero. Let's show him what happens to heroes in Gotham. Gotham. The name registered in Deku's mind, but it was a distant fact, irrelevant in the face of the immediate threat. He saw the man's finger tighten on the trigger. He saw the glint of the knife against the woman's neck. He moved. He used FA gene, releasing the kinetic energy he had subconsciously been building. To the thugs, it looked like he simply vanished. One moment he was 20 feet away, a strange green beacon. The next, he was right in front of them, a blur of motion. He didn't aim for them. He never aimed for the person if he could help it. His target was the ground. He pulled his fist back. Detroit. Smash! He didn't yell the name aloud, but the power was the same. He unleashed a mere 5% of One for All's might into the pavement a foot to the side of the men. The effect was not an explosion, but a concussive implosion of air. The asphalt cracked and buckled. A shockwave of pure force erupted outwards. It wasn't a gale force wind, it was a solid wall of pressure. The thug with the gun found his weapon ripped from his grasp as if by an invisible hand. It clattered against the far wall, its slide cracking. The man with the knife was thrown off balance, stumbling backward, the air punched from his lungs. The pressure wave was so intense it felt like his eardrums were about to burst. Debris, dust, and discarded trash swirled into a miniature cyclone around Deku. The entire exchange took less than a second. The two thugs were on the ground, disoriented and gasping, their ears ringing. They weren't injured, not seriously, but they were utterly terrified. They had never felt power like that, so immense, yet so controlled. It was alien. It was absolute. But Deku's attention was no longer on them. He instantly turned to the woman, the green lightning of full cowling dimming to a gentle, reassuring glow. He held up his hands in a non-threatening gesture. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? He asked, his voice soft, laced with genuine concern. The nurse, a woman named Martha, could only stare. Her mind struggled to process what had just happened. This boy, in a ridiculous green rabbit costume, had appeared like a bolt of lightning and incapacitated two armed men without even touching them. And now, He was looking at her with wide, earnest eyes filled with a sincerity she hadn't seen in years. I'm fine, she stammered, pulling her coat tighter around herself. Who are you? Oh, I'm sorry, I should have. My name is Deku, he said, bowing his head slightly, a gesture of pure, ingrained Japanese politeness that was utterly foreign in this place. I'm really sorry you had to go through that. It must have been terrifying. I apologize for the loud noise, too. I tried to be as careful as possible. He was apologizing? For saving her? Martha's fear began to recede, replaced by a profound sense of bewilderment. Behind him, the thug named Marco made a foolish decision. Scrambling to his feet, he lunged, the rusty knife still in his hand. Deku's danger sense flared, a sharp, stabbing sensation at the base of his skull. He didn't even turn around. A single, dark tendril of energy erupted from his back. Black Whip shot out with pinpoint accuracy, wrapping around the man's wrist and yanking him off his feet. More tendrils emerged, swiftly and efficiently binding both men from head to toe, leaving them cocooned and helpless against the brick wall. They struggled, but the energy whips held them as firmly as steel. Deku finally turned back to them, his expression not of triumph, but of disappointment. You shouldn't have done that. Now you'll just have to wait for the police. He then turned back to Martha, his concerned expression returning instantly. Your purse, he said, spotting it on the ground. He picked it up, dusted it off, and handed it to her. Is everything still there? She checked it numbly. Her wallet, her keys, her phone. All there. Yes, thank you, of course, he said with a small, reassuring smile. The smile was the most shocking thing of all. It was bright. It was genuine. It was a beacon of warmth in the cold, damp darkness of the Gotham night. Do you live far from here? I can walk you home if you'd like. Just to make sure you get there safely. Martha looked from the brightly lit hero to the two men wrapped in strange, black energy, and then back again. This was impossible. Heroes in Gotham were myths, terrifying shadows who broke bones and disappeared. They didn't wait around. They didn't apologize. They certainly didn't offer to walk you home. Yes, she finally managed to say. Thank you. My apartment is just 3 blocks away. Great, he chirped, his tone impossibly cheerful for the setting. Let's go. And so, as the two criminals hung trussed up on the wall, Izuku Midoriya, the symbol of hope and training, began his first civilian escort through the darkest city in a world not his own. He kept up a steady stream of reassuring chatter, asking about her job as a nurse, praising her for doing such important work, and generally being the most pleasant, earnest person she had ever met. For the first time in a decade of living in this city, Martha felt a forgotten sensation bubble up in her chest, a flicker of genuine, unadulterated hope. They were 2 blocks away when the wail of a police siren finally grew closer. Officer Miller grunted as he heaved his aging frame out of the squad car. 25 years on the GCPD had stripped him of any optimism he might have once possessed. He was a creature of cynicism, fueled by bad coffee and the bleak certainty that every call was just another variation on the same miserable theme. Another mugging in crime alley, he grumbled to his rookie partner, Officer Tsai. $10 says they're gone, and the victim is either dead or wishes they were. Gotta check it out all the same, Frank, Tsai said, his hand resting on his service weapon. He was still young enough to have a sliver of idealism left, a fact Miller found both endearing and pathetic. They rounded the corner into the alley specified by the anonymous tip and stopped dead in their tracks. The scene was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. 2 local lowlifes, Marco the Knife Leone and Slick Jimmy, were stuck to a brick wall. They were wrapped head to toe in some kind of black, semi-translucent material that seemed to be writhing with a faint energy. They were conscious, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. What in God's name? Tsai breathed, raising his gun. Hold on, kid, Miller said, his eyes scanning the scene. He'd seen a lot of weird things in Gotham. Joker gas victims, plants growing through buildings, men made of clay. But this was new. He nudged one of the wrapped-up thugs with his boot. You boys get into a new kind of trouble? Marco just whimpered. Miller's gaze swept the alley. The cracked pavement. The discarded gun with a broken slide. There were no bloodstains. No signs of a real fight. Just this. It was neat. Too neat. Central, this is car 54, he said into his shoulder radio. We've got the perps from that assault on 12th and Grand. They're gift-wrapped. Requesting a wagon, and maybe someone from the Meta Division, if we even have one that's not on Riddler's payroll. As they waited, securing the scene, a patrol car that had been canvassing the area pulled up. The officer inside rolled down his window. Hey, Frank. You won't believe this. We just talked to the Vic, a nurse named Martha Davies. Said some guy in a green rabbit suit saved her. Miller stared at him. A green rabbit suit, yeah. Said he took down the perps with an explosion of air, tied them up with living shadows, apologized for being loud, and then walked her home. Polite as you please. Cy lowered his gun, his face a mask of confusion. A polite vigilante? That's not a vigilante, kid. Miller grunted, holstering his own weapon as he looked at the bizarre scene. That's a damn fairy tale. Deku made his excuses once Martha was safely inside her apartment building, the triple-locked lobby door clicking shut behind her. He didn't want to stick around and answer questions he couldn't possibly explain. He needed to find a high place, to get a better view of this sprawling, dark metropolis. With a burst of one for all, he leaped, soaring effortlessly onto the rooftop of a 5-story tenement. He landed silently, the iron soles of his boots barely making a sound. From here, the city unfolded before him. It was vast, a concrete jungle of Gothic spires and grimy, Art Deco towers that clawed at a permanently overcast sky. The only lights were the sickly oranges of street lamps, the flashing reds and blues of distant police cars, and the garish neons of bars and seedy establishments. There was no warmth to it, no life. It was a city holding its breath, waiting for the next terrible thing to happen. He felt a profound sense of sorrow. How could people live like this? So much fear, so much darkness. His own world had its share of villains and tragedy, but it also had brightness. It had heroes who smiled, who stood in the sun and promised a better tomorrow. This place, this Gotham, felt like it had forgotten the sun existed. A symbol has to be seen, he thought, the words of All Might echoing in his memory. Someone who gives people hope that things will be okay. This city didn't have that. Or if it did, he hadn't seen any sign of it. He sat on the edge of the roof, his legs dangling over the precipice, and began to mutter, his mind spinning 1,000 miles a minute. Okay, new world. New city. Gotham. The criminals are desperate, not just power-hungry. The police seem tired. The general populace is terrified. Power levels of the average criminal are low, no quirks observed so far. But the atmosphere, the despair is a villain in itself. My priorities: 1. Survival. Find food and shelter. 2. Information. Learn everything I can about this world. Is there a hero system? Are there others like me? 3. Find a way home. There has to be a way. Maybe a scientist, someone who understands dimensional travel. He was so lost in his analytical trance that his danger sense was the only thing that saved him. It wasn't a sharp spike, but a slow, cold dread that prickled at the back of his neck. The feeling of being watched by a predator. He fell silent, his body tensing. He scanned the surrounding rooftops. He saw nothing but gargoyles and water towers. He activated full cowling to 5%, the green lightning a silent hum. He expanded his senses, listening. The drip of water. The distant traffic. The rustle of wind. And then, a whisper of displaced air directly behind him. He whirled around, dropping into a defensive crouch. Nothing. He was alone. But the feeling of being watched was gone. Whoever it was, they had retreated as silently as they had appeared. He was certain he hadn't imagined it. The sheer intensity of the presence, the calculated killing intent that had briefly focused on him, it was unlike anything he had ever felt. It wasn't the wild rage of a villain. It was the cold, patient observation of a hunter. A shiver ran down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. This city's darkness wasn't just an absence of light. It was alive. And it was watching him. In the cool, silent depths of the Batcave, Bruce Wayne sat before a bank of monitors. The sheer volume of data streaming across the screens would have been overwhelming to anyone else. To him, it was a symphony of information. Alfred Pennyworth placed a cup of Earl Grey tea beside him. A rather eventful evening, Master Bruce. That's one word for it. Bruce grunted, not taking his eyes off the central screen. It showed crystal clear footage of the incident in Crime Alley, captured by a dozen hidden, high-resolution cameras. He replayed the moment of impact for the 10th time. The boy. He couldn't have been older than 17, unleashing a shockwave of force from a punch that didn't even connect. The analytics software in the corner of the screen flashed with estimations. Kinetic energy output, approximate. 4.5 times 10 to the power of 5 joules. Air pressure displacement, 30 psi at epicenter. Velocity of subject, 200 miles per hour in a 0.05 second burst. Conclusion: metahuman. Power classification unknown. Threat level, potentially catastrophic. He's powerful, Alfred, Bruce said, his voice a low growl. On a scale that rivals Clark, if not in scope, then certainly in raw, localized force. And he's untrained. Reckless. He did save the woman, sir, Alfred noted, his tone mild. And by all accounts, was remarkably polite about it. He was sloppy, Bruce countered, pulling up another angle. His costume is bright green. A target. He engaged the enemy in a well-lit area. He spoke to the civilian, creating an emotional attachment, and a potential witness who can describe him. He neutralized the criminals non-lethally, but then he just left them for the police. He scoffed at the absurdity of it. He's placing his faith in a system he can't possibly understand. A system that is broken, corrupt, and inept. He zoomed in on the boy's face, captured in a brief moment when he smiled at the nurse. It was an open, honest, unguarded expression. It was the face of a true believer, the face of someone who had never known the soul-crushing darkness of a place like Gotham. His methods are naive, Bruce continued, his fingers flying across the keyboard, cross-referencing the energy signature with every known metahuman database on the planet. Nothing. No matches. It was as if the boy had materialized out of thin air. That kind of hope. This city chews up that kind of hope and spits it out as dust. He's painting a target on his back and on anyone he tries to save. Alfred watched his ward's grim reflection in the monitor. He saw the familiar lines of suspicion and mistrust etched deep into his features. Perhaps, Master Bruce, he is simply what he appears to be, a young man trying to do the right thing. No one is that simple, Bruce retorted. He brought up footage from his own callcam from a moment ago. The rooftop. He had been perched on a gargoyle less than 50 feet away, shrouded in shadow, observing the anomaly. The boy had been lost in thought, muttering to himself, before suddenly whirling around, alerted to his presence. Bruce had melted back into the shadows, impressed by the boy's senses but unmoved in his assessment. The boy was powerful, aware, but ultimately, an unknown quantity. A variable he couldn't control. And Batman did not tolerate uncontrolled variables in his city. He leaned back in his chair, the cape draping around him like the wings of a great bird. His jaw was set, his mind already calculating a dozen different scenarios, 100 different contingency plans. We have an anomaly, Alfred, he said, his voice flat and cold, devoid of any emotion save a grim resolve. Powerful, fast, and completely out of place. He turned to the older man, his eyes narrowed to slits in the cowl. Find out what he is. Gotham City did not deal in heroes. It dealt in shadows, myths, and cautionary tales. The city's protector was a creature of the night, a terrifying rumor-made flesh who was more ghost than man. His existence was confirmed only by the bruised bodies of criminals left for the GCPD, and the bat-shaped silhouette that sometimes blotted out the moon. He was a necessary darkness to fight a greater one. So, when the videos began to surface, Gotham reacted with the only tool it had for dealing with the unbelievable, cynical disbelief. The first clip was grainy, shot on a cheap smartphone by a terrified bystander who had been filming the mugging from their apartment window. It showed a sudden, impossible bloom of emerald light, followed by a concussive boom that rattled the camera. When the dust settled, two known thugs were stuck to a wall, wrapped in writhing black tendrils. The second clip, from a security camera across the street, was clearer. It showed the green figure, absurdly bright against the city's monochrome palette, politely handing a purse back to the victim before walking her away from the scene. By morning, it was the only thing the GCN, Gotham City News, was talking about. "We're calling him the Green Rabbit, folks, based on the, prominent ear-like appendages on his cowl," said Sharon Price, a news anchor whose weary expression was a permanent fixture. She gestured to a freeze frame of Deku, the image pixelated and blurry. "Details are scarce, but in the last 48 hours, this unidentified meta has been linked to a dozen incidents, ranging from foiled robberies to, in one case, rescuing a cat from a precarious telephone pole. Witnesses consistently describe his methods as unusual." The broadcast cut to a man-on-the-street interview. The man was a dockworker named Sal, his face weathered and grim. "Yeah, I saw him. Some kind of freak show. We was unloading a container, cable snapped. 2 tons of steel coming down. This green comet, or whatever, just shows up. Catches it. Then he sets it down gentle-like, asks if everyone's okay, and zips off before anyone can say boo. Scared the hell out of me. Too much power for one guy to have." Another interview, this time with a young mother. "He stopped a purse snatcher who grabbed my bag. The boy didn't even hit him. He just appeared in front of him, and the thief got so scared he tripped over his own feet. The green one, he gave me my bag back, and then he lectured the thief for 5 minutes about making better life choices. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen." On social media, the debate raged. Memes were already circulating. Deku's image photoshopped into dance-offs, with captions like, "Gotham's new party animal," hashtags trended, "Green Rabbit," "Emerald Comet," and the more derisive Broccoli Mite. But beneath the jokes, a different sentiment was beginning to sprout, a fragile and unfamiliar feeling. Gothamite for life fake. Has to be a viral marketing stunt for a new energy drink. Bloodhaven Blues. Heard he cries after he punches people. Total weirdo. But hey, at least my car didn't get broken into last night. Park Row survivor. I don't care if he's a weirdo. I saw him help an old woman carry her groceries up 4 flights of stairs. In the Narrows. No one does that. He was smiling. A real smile. It's been a while since I've seen one of those around here. This was the core of the phenomenon. It wasn't just that he was stopping crime. It was how he was doing it. He operated in broad daylight, a stark contrast to the city's nocturnal guardian. He was visible. He was loud. He was emotional. He didn't use fear. He used overwhelming, awe-inspiring power, and then immediately tempered it with overwhelming, disarming kindness. To a city that had forgotten what the sun felt like, the Emerald Comet was a confusing, terrifying, and undeniably captivating spectacle. He was a splash of vibrant, living color on a canvas of unending gray. The source of all this speculation was currently sitting on a lumpy mattress in a room that smelled of damp concrete and desperation. The apartment was a shoebox on the 5th floor of a rundown building in the East End, a place where the landlord only asked for cash and didn't ask for a name. The single window looked out onto a solid brick wall, a view that perfectly matched Izuku's sense of his own predicament. He'd earned the first month's rent with 2 hours of off-the-books labor at a scrap yard. The foreman, a hulking man with a skeptical scowl, had pointed to a pile of compacted cars that needed to be loaded onto a flatbed. "Crane's busted. Pay you 200 cash if you can get these loaded by noon." He'd clearly meant it as a joke. Izuku, using a carefully controlled 8% of one for all, had stacked the cars like children's blocks in under 10 minutes. The foreman had simply handed him the cash, mouth agape, and told him not to come back. It was too strange, even for Gotham. Now, in the relative privacy of his miserable room, Izuku was trying to impose order on the chaos of his new life. Spread across the floor were a half-eaten bag of stale pretzels, a bottle of water, and a brand-new, crisp notebook. On the cover, written in neat, precise script, was the title, Hero Analysis for a World Without Quirks. Volume 1, he muttered to himself as he wrote, a habit he never managed to break. Subject: the Batman. Activity is exclusively nocturnal. Public perception is minimal, bordering on urban legend. Based on criminal chatter and brief news archive mentions, he is the primary deterrent to large-scale organized crime in the city. Methods appear to be fear-based and stealth-oriented. Utilizes advanced technology, non-lethal munitions, and exceptional martial arts. No evidence of superhuman abilities, yet his feats suggest peak human conditioning, possibly beyond known limits. His psychological impact is his greatest weapon. He cultivates an aura of mystery and terror, making criminals afraid of the shadows themselves. Izuku paused, tapping his pen against his chin. It's a valid strategy, especially in a city this steeped in fear. It's sufficient. But it's not heroic. Not in the way I was taught. A hero should be a pillar, a symbol to the public, not just a threat to criminals. He's all stick and no carrot. The people are just as afraid of him as the villains are. How can you inspire hope if people are scared to even look at you? He flipped to a new page, labeling it. Gotham City, socio-political landscape, police force, GCPD, is underfunded and widely considered corrupt. Response times are slow, and morale is critically low. This necessitates vigilante action but also explains the public's deep-seated cynicism. The economic disparity is extreme. The wealthy elite live in ivory towers while neighborhoods like this one are left to decay. This creates a desperate criminal element, people who aren't evil, just out of options. Can you really punch that problem into submission? No. It needs systemic change. It needs hope, he sighed, the weight of it all pressing down on him. It was one thing to fight Shigaraki or Overhaul. They were tangible threats, ideologies that could be confronted and defeated. But how did you fight a city's despair? How did you defeat an enemy that lived in the hearts of millions of ordinary people? A wave of homesickness washed over him so intensely it made his chest ache. He thought of his mother's worried face, of All Might's proud smile, of Uraraka's cheerful laugh and Ida's chopping hand gestures. He imagined them back at UA, wondering where he'd gone. Was he declared missing? Dead? The uncertainty was a special kind of torture. He squeezed his eyes shut, forcing the tears back. Crying wouldn't get him home. Panicking wouldn't save anyone. He was alone, but he wasn't helpless. He had one for all. He had the knowledge and training from the best heroes in his world. And he had a mission. First, understand this place. Second, help where he could. Third, find a way back. He opened his notebook again, his resolve hardening. He would treat this as the ultimate hero exercise. He would analyze, strategize, and act. He would be the hero this city needed, whether it knew it or not, starting with figuring out who else was on the board. This, Batman, was a piece of the puzzle, but he was a shadow. There were others, whispers he'd heard on the street. A flying man in Metropolis, a woman with a golden lasso. This world had heroes. He just had to understand them. And maybe, just maybe, they could help him get home. In a hidden clock tower in the heart of Gotham, Barbara Gordon, known to the world's hidden communities as Oracle, was having a very bad day. A ghost had appeared in her city, and she couldn't find a single trace of him. This is impossible, she muttered, her fingers flying across a holographic keyboard. Dozens of data streams flowed across the massive monitor before her. Facial recognition against every database on the planet. Interpol, FBI, Argus, even Checkmate's black files. Nothing. No match for Izuku Midoriya. The name doesn't exist outside of a few dozen people who are all accounted for. What about the energy signature? Bruce's voice, filtered and gravelly, came from a speaker. He was patched in from the Batcave. That's the craziest part, Barbara said, pulling up a wildly fluctuating graph of green energy. I ran it against the metahuman energy spectrum. It doesn't match anything on record. It's not Kryptonian, not Thanagarian, not related to the Speed Force or the Green Lantern Corps. It behaves like a bioelectric field, but the power output is astronomical and malleable. It's like he can reshape its properties at will. 1 minute it's raw kinetic force, the next it's manifesting as some kind of solid energy construct. She gestured to a high-res photo of the Black Whip tendrils. It's like he has a dozen different powers rolled into one. A security risk, Bruce stated flatly. Or a miracle, Barbara countered, leaning back in her chair and rubbing her tired eyes. Bruce, you've seen the analytics. He's a powerhouse, but in every verified encounter, He's gone to extraordinary lengths to prevent collateral damage and avoid serious injury. He's non-lethal to a fault. When he caught that shipping container at the docks, the force required was immense, but the pressure he exerted on the container itself was so perfectly distributed that it didn't even dent. That's a level of control that is frankly terrifying. Control can be lost, Bruce said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He's an unknown quantity operating in our city with the power to level it. I need to know what he is and where he came from. Dick is in Bloodhaven. There's been a spike in sightings on the border. Have him do a soft recon. I want a first-hand assessment. On it, Barbara said, already routing the request. But Bruce, be careful how you approach this. Something tells me a full-on Batman intimidation tactic won't work on this kid. You might get a completely different reaction than you're used to. I'm counting on it, Bruce replied, and the line went dead. Dick Grayson, as Nightwing, loved the dance. The acrobatic swing through the concrete canyons, the rhythm of grapple and release, the wind whistling past his ears. It was freedom. It was the antithesis of the suffocating darkness of his mentor's methods. He was in Bloodhaven, his adopted city, but the whispers of the Emerald Comet had been growing louder, and reports were placing him near the bridge that connected the two cities. His comm crackled. Anything, Dick? It was Barbara. Just the usual Saturday night shenanigans, he quipped, flipping off a flagpole and landing silently on a rooftop ledge. But the air's buzzing. People are talking. They're looking up at the sky, and not because they're expecting the bat signal. That's when he saw it. Not the boy himself, but the effect of him. A fire had broken out in an old, low-income tenement building a few blocks away. It was a death trap, a place the fire department would struggle to reach in time. Smoke, thick and black, billowed into the night sky. Nightwing was already moving, his grapnel line firing, but he knew he'd be too slow to handle it alone. He was about to call it in when a streak of brilliant green lightning cut across the sky, moving with a velocity that made his own acrobatics look like slow motion. The Green Rabbit, Deku, arrived at the scene like a miniature meteor. He didn't land on a nearby roof to assess. He shot straight into the heart of the fire, smashing through a fourth-floor window. Nightwing perched on an adjacent building, pulling out a pair of high-powered binoculars. He watched, fascinated and appalled. The kid's approach was all kinds of wrong. No stealth, no assessment, just a full frontal assault. It was reckless. It was loud. It was effective. A moment later, the windows on the fifth floor blew outwards, not from an explosion, but from a directed blast of wind. Deku was using his power to create a vent, clearing the smoke for the people trapped inside. Nightwing could hear him, his voice impossibly clear even from this distance, amplified by the strange energy that crackled around him. It's okay. I'm here. Everyone, stay calm and come to my voice. It was the tone that struck Dick. It wasn't the commanding bark of a cop or the grim reassurance of Batman. It was the earnest, slightly breathless plea of someone who genuinely cared. Then the rescues began. A dark whip-like appendage shot out from the smoke, a family of 3 clinging to it as Deku lowered them gently to the street below before zipping back into the inferno. He emerged moments later from a third-story window, an elderly man in one arm and a young child in the other, his boots crackling with energy as he used controlled bursts to soften his landing. He didn't just drop them off. He stayed with them for a precious few seconds, looking them in the eye. You're safe now. Everything is going to be all right. Dick watched, his analytical mind, honed by years of training under Batman, cataloging everything. The boy was impossibly fast, impossibly strong. His use of those black whips was versatile, lifelines, grappling hooks, shields. He was a one-man emergency response unit. But more than the power, Dick saw the heart. The kid was checking on every single person, his glowing form a beacon of hope in the choking smoke. He was crying. Actual tears were streaming down his face, visible even through the grime and soot, as he pulled the last person from the flames just as the roof began to collapse. When the fire department finally arrived, Deku was gone. Nightwing tracked the residual energy signature, a faint trail of ozone and displaced static. He found him 2 rooftops over, sitting on the edge of a building, staring back at the burning tenement. The boy's shoulders were slumped, and even from behind, Dick could sense his exhaustion. His costume was scorched and torn. Nightwing landed behind him, making sure his footfalls were audible. "Quite a show," he said, his voice casual. Deku shot to his feet, whirling around, his body instantly alight with green energy. He looked like a startled animal, ready to bolt or fight. His eyes, wide and green, scanned Nightwing from head to toe, the emblem on his chest, the eskrima sticks on his back. Recognition dawned on his face. "You're Nightwing," Deku breathed, the energy around him dimming. I've seen articles about you. Bloodhaven's protector. Your acrobatic style, your use of non-lethal equipment, it's incredible. Your efficiency in crowd control during the blockbuster incident was textbook. A 75% reduction in civilian panic, according to my projections." Dick blinked, taken aback. He hadn't expected a fanba analysis. "You've been doing your homework." "I have to," Deku said, his expression turning serious. "I need to understand this place." He looked back at the fire. "I wasn't fast enough. The building is a total loss. Those people, they've lost everything." "You saved them," Dick pointed out. "Every single one. That's a win in this town. But their homes..." Deku's fists clenched. "A hero should save everything. Their lives, their homes, their hope. I only got 1 out of 3. There it was again. That impossible, earnest idealism. It was so pure, so untainted by the cynicism that coated every brick of Gotham and Bloodhaven. It was the kind of thing Bruce had tried to beat out of him, and Jason had tragically lost. "You can't save everyone from everything, kid," Dick said gently. "You try, you'll just burn yourself out." "I have to try," Deku insisted, his gaze intense. "If I don't, who will?" He looked at Nightwing, a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. You're a hero. You get it right? We have to be the ones who don't give up." Before Dick could formulate a response, a voice, sharp and laced with aristocratic disdain, crackled in his ear. "Grayson. Report. Have you made contact with the anomaly?" It was Damien. Deku's head cocked, his hearing clearly sharp enough to catch the faint sound. He tensed again. "Gotta run," Dick said, offering a small, 2-fingered salute. "Nice work tonight. But a piece of advice? Be careful. A bright light in a dark place draws moths. And in this city, the moths have teeth." With that, Nightwing leaped from the building, firing his grapnel line and swinging away into the night, leaving Izuka Midoriya alone on the rooftop, more confused than ever. Dick landed a few blocks away, leaning against the chimney stack. "Report, Damien," he said into his comm. "He's just a kid with the power to level this city." Damien's voice snapped back. "Father was right to be concerned. Did you ascertain his origin?" "Didn't exactly have time to ask for his life story. He was a little busy saving a dozen people from a fire, a task he approached with the subtlety of a rampaging elephant." Damien scoffed. "I have been monitoring his movements. He telegraphs every action. He announces his presence. He even weeps while he works. It's pathetic. He is a liability, not an asset." "He has more heart than anyone I've met in a long time, Damien," Dick said, his voice hardening slightly. "He believes in what he's doing. Completely. That's not something to dismiss. Belief is a vulnerability. Sentiment is a weakness. Father taught us that. This crying broccoli boy will not survive a single encounter with real evil. He will be broken, and his manufactured hope will curdle into a poison that will infect this entire city. He needs to be contained, before he does more harm than good." "You're wrong," Dick said, but he knew the conversation was over. He looked back in the direction he'd left Deku, but the rooftop was empty. The green comet was gone, vanished back into the shadows he seemed so determined to fight. Dick felt a pang of worry. The kid was a force of nature, a beacon of pure, uncut heroism, and he was about to learn that in Gotham, beacons were just targets. Back in the Batcave, Bruce Wayne assimilated the reports. Oracle's digital dead end. Nightwing's first-hand account of the boy's power, recklessness, and unnerving sincerity. Damien's contemptuous dismissal. He watched the footage from Nightwing's cowcam, listening to the exchange between the two. "A hero should save everything, their lives, their homes, their hope," the words echoed in the silent cave. It was the kind of sentiment that had died in him in a dark alley 30 years ago. It was the idealism of a world that didn't exist. Not here. He brought up a map of the city, dotted with the locations of the green vigilantes' appearances. The pattern was clear. He was focusing on the poorest, most desperate neighborhoods, the Narrows, the East End, Crime Alley. Places the GCPD had all but abandoned. Places where hope had been extinguished for generations. And now, this boy was trying to relight it with a single, blinding match. Bruce knew what happened when you brought a flame into a powder keg. "Alfred," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Sir, the boy is becoming a symbol." He pointed to a news feed showing a small, makeshift shrine being erected where Deku had stopped the mugging, with a crudely drawn picture of a green hero and the words, "Thank you," scrawled beneath it. And symbols are dangerous. They create expectations. They make people bold. They make them drop their guard. This hope he's peddling is a drug, and the withdrawal will be devastating when he fails. When this city shows him what it truly is and breaks him. He stood up, the black cape settling around him. His course of action was clear. This anomaly, this Deku, wasn't a villain. But his naivete was a threat on par with anything the Joker could devise. It threatened to unravel the delicate ecosystem of fear and order he had spent his entire life building. He had to confront him. He had to show him the truth of this place. He had to teach the boy that in Gotham, there was no light at the end of the tunnel. There was only a deeper, more profound darkness, and the only way to navigate it was to become a part of it. The Gotham docks were a skeleton picked clean by recession and decay. Rusting cranes stood like ancient, skeletal beasts against the perpetually bruised purple sky. The air, thick with the cloying smells of salt, dead fish, and diesel, clung to the back of the throat. It was a place of forgotten things and clandestine deals, the perfect breeding ground for the city's bottom feeders. For Izuku Midoriya, it was a library of whispered information, and he was here to check out a book. Perched atop a silent, darkened crane, he was a small knot of green against the sprawling industrial decay. He'd spent 2 days listening, piecing together fragments of conversations from low-level thugs and frightened whispers from locals. The name that kept surfacing was the Penguin. A major player, an arms dealer. And tonight, he was supposedly moving a shipment of military-grade hardware. Izuku's new notebook lay open on his lap, a page dedicated to what he'd learned. Oswald Cobblepot, aka the Penguin. Crime lord with a focus on weapons trafficking. Publicly, a legitimate nightclub owner, establishes plausible deniability. Smart. Controls a significant portion of the city's underworld logistics. Below this, he had sketched a rough map of Pier 12, marking patrol routes and potential weak points. His danger sense had been a low, persistent thrum for the last hour, a clear sign that this was the place. Down below, a collection of thugs, looking more like dock workers in greasy overalls than a criminal syndicate, milled around a large shipping container. A black, armored truck had just backed up to it. The deal was happening now. Okay. Assess. Don't rush. His eyes scanned the scene. 12 hostiles on the ground, all armed with handguns or rusty shotguns. 2 more with automatic rifles positioned on the warehouse roof opposite him. The target was the crate being loaded onto the truck. His objective, neutralize the hostiles, secure the weapons, and gather intelligence. Brute force was an option, but not the smart one. He needed to be a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. Time to go to work, he whispered, snapping the notebook shut and tucking it securely into a pouch. He activated full cowling at a low 15%, just enough to feel the familiar hum of power without giving off his signature green glow. He then took a deep breath, focusing on the 6th user's quirk. A thick, gray fog began to pour from his body, not with a hiss, but with the silent, creeping dread of a sea mist rolling in. Smokescreen. It billowed downwards, silent and heavy, engulfing the pier in an impenetrable gray blanket. Immediately, shouts of confusion erupted from below. What the hell is this? I can't see a thing. It's the bat. The panic was his cover. He leaped from the crane, using float to drift silently into the heart of the chaos he'd created. He was a ghost in his own storm. The moment his feet touched the ground, his danger sense spiked, a sharp jab behind his right eye. A thug, blindly firing his shotgun into the fog. Izuku didn't need to see him. He used FA gene, releasing a burst of stored kinetic energy. In the space of a heartbeat he moved, the air rippling around him. He was beside the thug, his hand chopping down on the man's wrist with surgical precision. The shotgun clattered to the concrete. A dark tendril of black whip shot from his arm, wrapping around the man and hoisting him silently into the rafters of the pier's awning, securely bound and out of the fight. One down. The fog was a perfect arena. His senses, augmented by One for All and honed by Danger Sense, gave him a complete picture of the battlefield. He could feel the vibrations of footsteps, the subtle shifts in air pressure from panicked movements, the piercing throb of every potential gunshot before the trigger was even pulled. He moved through the smoke like a phantom. A burst of FA gene here, a precise, disarming strike there. Black whip tendrils lashed out, snatching weapons from hands and trussing up goons with silent efficiency. The men on the roof were no safer. He shot upwards, a green blur for a split second, and dispatched them with two quick, non-lethal blows to the back of the neck before they could even register his presence. He left them tied to a ventilation unit. In less than 30 seconds the pier was silent, save for the groans of 14 men now hanging from various cranes and rafters like grotesque Christmas ornaments. The leader of the group, a burly man with a penguin tattooed on his neck, stood alone by the open truck, a heavy machine gun trembling in his hands. The fog swirled around him, the silence more terrifying than any noise. "Show yourself!" he roared, spraying a volley of bullets into the mist. Danger Sense screamed. Izuku danced between the bullets, the slugs passing through the space he had occupied milliseconds before. He didn't need to attack the man directly. He attacked the ground. A 5% Delaware smash, flicked from his finger, sent a compressed ball of air pressure into the asphalt at the man's feet. The ground buckled. The thug was thrown off balance, his aim ruined. In that instant of vulnerability, Izuku was on him. He didn't throw a punch. He simply placed his hand on the machine gun and activated One for All at 1%. The metal of the gun groaned and warped, the barrel bending into a useless U-shape. The man stared at the ruined weapon, then at the green-lit figure before him, his face a mask of utter disbelief. He dropped the gun and put his hands up. "I'm done. I'm done." Izuku nodded, securing the man with black whip before turning his attention to the open crate. It was filled with military-grade assault rifles, grenades, and body armor. Enough firepower to start a small war. A cold fury settled in his gut. This was what Cobblepot was peddling. This was the fuel for the city's fire. He found a laptop on the truck's passenger seat, likely containing shipping manifests. This was the intelligence he needed. He slammed the truck doors shut, used Black Whip to seal them, and left an anonymous tip with the GCPD on a burner phone he'd bought. As the first sirens began their mournful wail in the distance, Izuku Midoriya melted back into the Gotham night, a stolen laptop under his arm. In the Bat family's hidden communications network, an alarm, silent but severe, began to flash. "Barbara!" Bruce's voice crackled, devoid of pleasantries. "I'm seeing a massive energy spike at the docks, followed by a GCPD dispatch to Pier 12. Penguin's turf." In the clock tower, Barbara Gordon was already ahead of him. Her fingers danced across her console, pulling up satellite imagery, traffic cameras, and police scanners. "I see it. Reports of a haunted fog and living shadows. 14 of Cobblepot's men incapacitated, non-lethally. A major arms shipment intercepted. Looks like our boy has been busy." She zoomed in on a traffic cam image from a block away. It was blurry, but unmistakable, a figure in a green costume, leaping between buildings, a laptop case in his hand. "He's getting bolder," Bruce grunted. "And he just stole evidence from a crime scene. Or he's doing the investigation the GCPD won't," Barbara countered, her mind already working. "He has a laptop connected to Penguin's network. If he tries to access it, he might trip Cobblepot's security. Or if he tries to cross-reference it with public networks." She set up a digital tripwire, a silent, invisible net cast across the city's data infrastructure, specifically tuned to the unique, chaotic energy signature of the new meta. If he so much as tried to log on to a public library's Wi-Fi, she would know. "I'll keep an eye on him," she said. Digitally, at least. Back in his grimy apartment, Izuku set the laptop on the floor. It was a rugged, high-end model, heavily encrypted. He knew his limits. He wasn't a master hacker like La Brava, but his analytical mind was a powerful tool. He spent an hour bypassing the basic security, his fingers flying across the keyboard, muttering to himself, "Okay, the OS is custom, but it's built on a standard framework. If I can just get past the user-level encryption, I can access the shipping manifests. But the file names are all code. I need a key, something to cross-reference them with." His eyes lit up. Police records. Impound logs. Shipping registries. If he could get into the GCPD's network, he could decipher Cobblepot's entire operation. It was a huge risk. Their security had to be formidable. But the potential reward was too great. He tethered the laptop to his burner phone, routing his connection through a dozen scrambled proxies he'd learned to set up from online tutorials. It was amateurish, but it was the best he could do. He found a backdoor into the GCPD's public server, a small vulnerability in the code that he could exploit. He began his intrusion. He felt a small thrill as the first progress bar began to fill. He was in. He was wrong. He hadn't broken in. He had been allowed in. He had walked right into the spider's parlor. The moment his code touched the GCPD server, a digital presence of unimaginable complexity and power slammed down on him. It wasn't a clumsy firewall. It was an elegant, sentient defense system. His proxies were vaporized in a nanosecond. His connection was traced, isolated, and trapped. A new icon flashed onto the laptop's screen, a stylized, golden bat symbol. Then, a text-to-speech voice, calm, female, and utterly commanding, filled the small room. Unknown entity. You have accessed a restricted network. Cease your activity immediately. You have been identified. Izuku froze, his heart pounding. It was a trap. He tried to sever the connection, but it was like trying to pull his hand out of setting concrete. He was locked in. The system was now actively trying to slice through his own laptop's meager defenses, trying to activate its camera and microphone. He was about to smash the machine when he stopped. He looked at the golden bat icon. Batman. This had to be his work. Or his associates. The efficiency, the absolute control, it was breathtaking. Instead of fighting, his curiosity and analytical nature took over. He stopped trying to escape and started typing, sending a message back through the secure channel the mysterious entity had opened. Your security architecture is incredible. It's a multi-layered, heuristic system. It learns. It adapts. Is that a quantum randomized encryption key? I've only read about those in theoretical papers. Silence. The digital assault on his laptop paused. He had clearly done the unexpected. He typed again, his enthusiasm overriding his fear. I apologize for the intrusion. My name is Deku. I am not trying to cause harm. I am conducting an investigation into Oswald Cobblepot's arms trafficking network. This laptop contains his shipping manifests, but they are coded. I was attempting to cross-reference them with GCPD impound records. In the clock tower, Barbara Gordon stared at her screen, her eyebrows raised. She had been ready for a fight, a digital slugfest against some new metahuman hacker. She was not prepared for a fanboy. She ran a quick analysis on his typing style. The language was earnest, the technical questions genuine. This wasn't a trick. She sent a reply, her own words now typed out. Oracle, who is Deku? Deku, that's me. I'm new here. I'm a hero. Barbara almost scoffed. A hero. In Gotham. She'd seen dozens of would-be heroes come and go, all of them broken or corrupted by the city. But this one was different. He hadn't tried to hide. He had explained his intentions. He had complimented her work. It was disarming. Oracle, this network is not your personal library. The GCPD is not your research assistant. The evidence you have is to be turned over to the proper authorities. Deku, but they are the proper authorities, aren't they? From my analysis, a significant portion of the GCPD is on Cobblepot's payroll. Giving this to them would be tipping him off. You know that. Your presence here proves you operate outside their system. Because you know it's broken. Barbara leaned back. He wasn't just a powerhouse. He was smart. He'd been in the city for less than a week and had already come to the same conclusion that had taken Bruce years to accept. She felt a strange, unfamiliar impulse. Not trust, but professional curiosity. He was an analyst, just like her. He was approaching the problem logically. She made a decision. She wasn't going to help him. But she wasn't going to stop him either. Not yet. Oracle, this is my house. You're welcome to look, but I suggest you don't break any windows. The owner has a temper. Stay out of our way. With that, she severed the connection. The golden bat icon vanished. Izuku was left staring at his screen in the silent, dingy room. He hadn't gotten the information he wanted, but he had gotten something far more valuable: confirmation. He wasn't alone. There were others fighting this fight. An oracle who controlled the city's data, and a Batman with a temper. They were pieces on the board. Allies? Rivals? He didn't know. But he knew they were there, and he had made an impression. In a forgotten sub-basement of the abandoned Arkham Asylum, the world was a sterile, quiet hell. Books on abnormal psychology and chemical engineering lined the walls. Beakers and vials bubbled softly over Bunsen burners. The air was cold and smelled of antiseptic and ozone. Dr. Jonathan Crane sat before a bank of monitors, his face gaunt and pale in their glow. He had no interest in the petty squabbles of crime lords like Cobblepot. He was a researcher, an artist, and his medium was fear. He'd been observing the city's slow decay with the detached interest of a scientist watching bacteria grow in a petri dish. It was all so predictable, so boring. Then, the new variable had been introduced. The Emerald Comet. He dismissed it at first. Another costumed fool with more power than sense. But then he saw the news report about the incident at the docks. It wasn't the footage of the fight that caught his attention, the swirling fog, the efficient takedown. It was the aftermath. A reporter was interviewing a grizzled old dockworker who had witnessed the entire event. The man's face, etched with a lifetime of Gotham cynicism, was transformed. "I ain't never seen nothing like it," the man said, his voice raspy with awe. He moved like lightning. But afterwards, a couple of the boys were shaken up, and he came over, made sure they were okay. He told us to stay safe. He smiled. And for a second I thought, maybe things don't have to be so damn dark all the time. Crane leaned closer to the screen, his slender fingers steepled before his lips. He rewound the footage, watching the dockworker's face again. He saw it. The subtle relaxation of the jaw, the slight widening of the eyes. The faint, almost imperceptible upward turn of the lips. It was hope. A genuine, biological, chemical reaction. An infectious agent introduced into his carefully controlled experiment. His entire life's work, his philosophy, was built on one unshakable axiom: fear is the prime motivator. It is the purest, most fundamental human emotion. Love, courage, hope, they were all just elaborate psychological constructs, fragile shields built to obscure the screaming terror at the core of the human condition. This boy, this Deku, was a walking, talking refutation of his thesis. He didn't use fear. He preached hope. He inspired it. He was the ultimate antithesis. The perfect anomaly. A slow, chilling smile spread across Jonathan Crane's thin lips. The boredom he had felt for so long evaporated, replaced by a surge of intellectual and creative fervor. Killing this boy would be pointless. An artist does not simply smash a masterpiece he does not understand. No, he would study it. Dissect it. He would peel back its layers, one by one, until he found the raw, primal fear he knew had to be hiding underneath. He would take Gotham's brightest new hero and prove to the world that hope was merely the absence of sufficient fear. He would make the Emerald Hope the canvas for his greatest masterpiece of terror. He turned to a fresh page in his leather-bound journal. At the top, he wrote a title: The Scarecrow Doctrine, a study in forced deconstruction of a hope-based heroic archetype. Below it, he began to sketch the molecular chain for a new strain of his toxin. This one would be different. It wouldn't just cause fear. It would be an antidote to hope itself. It would find the brightest parts of a person's soul and turn them into the darkest pits of their own private hell. The subject's name was Deku. The experiment was about to begin. The rain in Gotham was a constant, miserable drizzle that never seemed to wash the city clean, only smear the grime around. It was a baptism of filth, and Izuku Midoriya was beginning to feel it seep into his soul. For 3 days since his digital encounter with Oracle, he had been a whirlwind of green, a tireless phantom of altruism. He'd stopped 17 muggings, prevented 4 armed robberies, and single-handedly evacuated a tenement during a gas leak. He was running on fumes, catnapping in his squalid room, and subsisting on protein bars he'd bought with the last of his scrapyard money. He was making a difference. He could see it in the small things. The way a few people on the street would look up, not in fear, but with a flicker of anticipation. The way the chatter in the criminal underworld was shifting from derision to grudging respect and caution. He was becoming a presence, a symbol. It was working, but he was also keenly aware of another presence. A shadow that danced at the edges of his perception. He would be perched on a rooftop, and his danger sense would emit a low, cold hum, not the sharp spike of immediate threat, but the chilling certainty of being observed by a predator. He would turn, and there would be nothing but a gargoyle or a swirl of mist. Twice, he had caught a fleeting glimpse of a cape, a silhouette that was more void than man, vanishing into the oppressive dark before he could get a lock on it. It was Batman. He knew it. The whispers on the street, the fear in the eyes of criminals, and Oracle's warning all pointed to the same conclusion. The city's original Dark Knight was watching him, studying him. Izuku found himself in a strange, silent dialogue with the myth, leaving criminals tied up with neat, polite notes for the GCPD, a stark contrast to the brutal, fear-driven methods Batman was known for. It was a statement of intent. This is my way. This is how a hero should be. Tonight the dialogue would become a confrontation. Izuku had just foiled a carjacking on the Tricorner Bridge. He'd used Black Whip to lift the car, occupants and all, 10 feet into the air, a move that had caused the would-be thieves to faint from sheer shock. After setting the car down and making sure the terrified family inside was okay, he'd leaped to the top of the bridge's Gothic support tower to watch them drive safely away. The rain slicked the stone beneath his boots. The city sprawled before him, a glittering mosaic of broken dreams. He felt a familiar pang of loneliness, a yearning for home that was a constant ache in his chest. That's when the cold hum of danger sense returned, stronger than ever. It wasn't on a nearby rooftop this time. It was directly behind him. He didn't turn around immediately. He had expected this. He took a steadying breath, the chill rain plastering his hair to his forehead. "You've been following me," he said, his voice clear and steady over the sound of the wind. A voice, deeper and rougher than he could have imagined, answered from the shadows. It sounded like grinding stones, like the city's own gravelly soul-given speech. "You are a threat." Izuku slowly turned. There, standing not 10 feet away, was the Batman. He was larger than the blurry photo suggested, a monolith of black and gray Kevlar and muscle. The darkness clung to him, not as camouflage, but as an extension of his being. The cape, scalloped at the edges like a bat's wing, shifted in the wind. The cowl's white, soulless lenses were fixed on him, and Izuku felt the full, crushing weight of his analytical gaze. It was the most intimidating presence he had ever faced, rivaling even All for One's malevolent aura. "I'm not a threat," Izuku replied, pushing down the instinct to activate full cowling. He needed this to be a conversation, not a fight. "I'm here to help." "Help?" Batman took a step forward, his movements utterly silent. "You're a child in a garish costume, wielding power you can't possibly comprehend. You operate in the open, a bright, shining target. You are giving the people of this city false hope." The word struck a nerve, a direct assault on the core of Izuku's entire philosophy. "Hope is never false," he shot back, his own voice rising with conviction. "It's the only thing people in a place like this have left. A symbol has to be seen, to be heard. You hide in the shadows, you use fear. But that just makes people more afraid. They aren't just scared of the criminals. They're scared of the dark you live in. A hero shouldn't be another monster hiding in the closet." "Fear is a tool," Batman countered, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. "It is the only language this city's predators understand. I am a surgeon, cutting out a cancer. You are a floodlight, attracting every moth and parasite to the flame. You show your face. You speak to victims. You create attachments. Those are not assets, they are liabilities. They are weaknesses your enemies will exploit to destroy you and everyone you try to save. Caring about people isn't a weakness. Izuku took a step forward himself, his fists clenching. He could feel one for all buzzing under his skin, reacting to his indignation. It's the entire point. You talk about surgery, but you're not healing the city, you're just managing the symptoms. You're not inspiring anyone to be better. You're just scaring the bad people into being quieter. What about the good people? What symbol do they have? They have the symbol of a locked door and a quiet street, Batman said, his tone absolute. They have the knowledge that there is something in the night that the monsters are afraid of. That is all I can give them. That is all this city deserves. The sheer, undiluted cynicism of the statement hit Izuku like a physical blow. This man was completely broken. He was a hero born from such profound trauma that he couldn't see a path forward that didn't involve scaring the world into submission. Izuku's anger was suddenly replaced by a wave of overwhelming empathy. This wasn't a monster. This was a man in pain, a man who had wrapped himself in so much armor that he had forgotten the feeling of warmth. You're wrong, Izuku said, his voice softening. No one deserves to live in fear. Not the criminals, not the victims, not you. A hero should be a light, someone who makes them feel safe in the day, not just scared in the night. For a moment, there was only the sound of the rain and the wind. The two figures stood on the tower, a perfect tableau of opposing ideologies. The dark night and the emerald hope, the unflinching shadow and the unbreakable light. Batman's posture didn't change, but Izuku could feel a subtle shift in the atmosphere. His words, his empathy, had struck an unexpected chord. It hadn't placated Batman, it had angered him. Light? Batman's voice was a low, dangerous whisper. You know nothing of light, or of the darkness that consumes it. You are a child who has never seen a real monster. You think you can save this city with smiles and kind words? He took another step, his presence becoming overwhelming. You want to be a symbol of hope? Fine. I will show you what this city does to symbols. Before Izuku could react, Batman threw something at his feet. Not an attack, but a small, metallic disc. It clattered on the stone. This city will break you, Batman snarled. It will chew you up and spit out the bones. And when it does, I will be there to clean up your mess. With a swirl of his cape that seemed to defy physics, he was gone. He didn't leap. He simply vanished into the rain and shadows, leaving Izuku alone on the tower, his heart pounding. The small disc at his feet began to emit a low, rhythmic beep. It was a tracker. A warning. I am always watching. Izuku looked out over the city, the weight of Batman's words settling on him like a shroud. He had come face to face with the city's guardian, its broken soul. The man wasn't an enemy, but he wasn't an ally either. He was a challenge. A test. I won't break, Izuku whispered to the empty air, his voice a promise to the dark night, to the city, and to himself. I'll prove you wrong. I'll show you what a real hero can be. The tracker at his feet continued its steady, ominous pulse, a heartbeat in the rain, counting down the time until the city would make him prove it. The tracker Batman had left him was a masterpiece of microengineering. Izuku, having disassembled it in his room, was in awe. It had a self-sustaining power source, multi-spectrum tracking capabilities, and was probably tougher than his own Iron Soul boots. It was also a clear message. He had left it on his windowsill, active, a gesture of transparent defiance. He had nothing to hide. The week following his confrontation with the Dark Knight was a blur of motion. Izuku threw himself into his self-appointed role with a frantic, almost manic energy. He felt as if he was on trial, with Batman as the judge and the entire city as the jury. Every person he saved, every crime he stopped, was a piece of evidence submitted in defense of his ideals. He became a fixture in the Narrows, the city's most blighted and forgotten district. He was no longer just an emergency responder. He was a part of the community. He helped unload supply trucks for the local free clinic, his strength making a day's work last minutes. He used blackwork to clear debris from a collapsed-in street the city had ignored for years. He sat with scared, lonely children on crumbling stoops, telling them stories of his world, of heroes who could fly and create ice from thin air, stories that sounded like impossible fairy tales but brought genuine smiles to their faces. And the city was responding. The moniker Green Rabbit was fading, replaced by something new, something whispered with a reverence that Gotham rarely afforded anyone. They were calling him the Emerald Hope. Street artists began painting murals of a vibrant green figure on brick walls, covering over gang tags and grime. For the first time in a generation, children in the Narrows were playing hero again, tying ragged green towels around their necks as capes. Izuku felt the shift. It was a fragile, tentative thing, but it was real. He was chipping away at the city's monolithic despair. Batman was wrong. People didn't need to be scared into submission. They needed to be inspired to hope. He was so focused on proving the darkness wrong that he never stopped to consider that the darkness was watching, learning, and preparing a lesson of its own. Dr. Jonathan Crane considered the Otisburg district to be a perfect microcosm of Gotham's specific brand of apathy. It wasn't a crime-ridden slum like the Narrows or a nest of corruption like the Diamond District. It was a place of quiet, grinding mundanity. Rows of identical, grim-faced apartment buildings housed people who had long ago given up on dreams and settled for survival. They didn't hope for a better tomorrow, they just hoped tomorrow wouldn't be any worse. It was the perfect testing ground. From a nondescript van parked 2 blocks away, Crane monitored a series of atmospheric sensors. He wore a simple lab coat over his tweed suit, a pair of goggles pushed up on his forehead. This was science, not theatrics. The theatrics would come later. Dispersal commencing, he murmured into a voice recorder. Subject District, Otisburg. Agent, Fear Toxin, Variant Delta H, Codename, Despair. He pressed a button on a console. In the ventilation system of the Otisburg Community Center, 3 canisters hissed, releasing a colorless, odorless gas. It was evening, and the center was filled with people. A town hall meeting about a proposed rent hike, a children's karate class, an elderly book club. A perfect cross-section of his chosen demographic. Variant Delta H was his magnum opus. His classic toxin simply triggered the amygdala, inducing primal terror. This new formula was far more insidious. It was a psychoactive agent that targeted the brain's centers for optimism and resilience. It didn't just create fear, it inverted hope. It took every positive thought, every cherished memory, every sliver of belief that things could get better, and twisted it into a source of profound, soul-crushing despair. It was an anti-hope agent, and it was designed with one specific person in mind. Crane watched the readouts from the hidden cameras he'd planted inside the center. The effects were beginning. A woman arguing passionately for tenants' rights suddenly fell silent, a look of utter desolation on her face. "What's the point?" she mumbled, slumping into her chair. "He'll just raise it anyway. We'll lose our homes. We always lose." In the dojo, a young boy who had just proudly earned his yellow belt looked down at it, and his face crumpled. "I'm not any stronger," he sobbed to his instructor. "This is just a stupid piece of cloth. The bullies are still going to beat me up tomorrow." The gas spread. Laughter turned to weeping. Conversations faded into miserable silence. The very air in the community center seemed to grow heavy with misery. Crane smiled. The preliminary test was a success. "Phase 1 complete," he said to his recorder. "Now for the catalyst." He picked up a burner phone and dialed the city's emergency line, his voice disguised by a digital modulator. "There's a terrible sadness at the Otisburg Community Center. People are crying. They're giving up. Please send help. Send the green one. Send the Emerald Hope." He hung up, his eyes gleaming with academic curiosity. He was about to introduce his antithesis to his thesis. Izuku was on his way back to his room when the call came through on a police scanner app he'd installed on his phone. The report was bizarre, lacking the usual urgency of a fire or a robbery. He changed direction immediately, his heart pounding with a familiar sense of duty. He arrived in minutes, a green streak against the skyline. He landed softly in front of the community center. There were no sirens, no visible signs of a threat, but his danger sense was screaming, a high-pitched, nauseating whine that told him something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. He pushed open the doors and stepped inside. The scene was one of quiet, unnerving horror. The large hall was filled with people, but no one was moving. They were sitting on the floor, slumped in chairs, or leaning against walls, all of them exhibiting the same symptoms. Some were weeping silently, tears tracking through the grime on their faces. Others stared blankly into space, their eyes hollow, their faces slack with utter hopelessness. The air was thick with the sound of quiet sobbing and whispered miseries. "It's no use," a man muttered, staring at his hands. "I'm going to lose my job. I'm a failure. She's never going to love me back," a teenager wept. "I'll always be alone." Izuku's hero instincts kicked in. This was a villain's work. A quirk, or maybe some kind of gas. He held his breath, though he suspected it was too late. He had to get these people out. "Everyone, listen to me," he called out, his voice echoing in the unnaturally quiet hall. "My name is Deku. I'm a hero. I'm here to help you. Everything is going to be okay." His words, which had worked miracles in the Narrows, were utterly useless here. In fact, they seemed to make things worse. A woman looked up at him, her eyes devoid of any spark. "A hero?" she said, her voice a dead monotone. "You can't help. You're just a boy in a costume. The landlord will still evict us. My son will still be sick. You being here doesn't change anything." Her words were a physical blow. The despair toxin in the air was working on him, too, but it was also using the people as a vector. Their hopelessness was a weapon, aimed directly at the core of his being. He shook his head, refusing to give in. "Yes, I can. I can get you out of here, away from whatever is doing this to you." He rushed to a group of children cowering in a corner. "It's all right," he said, his voice as gentle as he could make it. "Let's get you outside." One of the little girls, who couldn't have been more than 6, looked at him with ancient, weary eyes. "Why?" she asked. "The world is scary. It's dark and cold. It's better in here." Panic began to coil in Izuku's stomach. He couldn't reason with them. He couldn't inspire them. The chemical assault on their minds was absolute. He was a beacon of hope in a room that had been chemically rewired to be allergic to light. He had to act. He activated full cowling to 20%. "I'm sorry," he yelled. "I'll get you all out." He became a green whirlwind. He started carrying people out, 2 and 3 at a time, depositing them on the lawn outside. But as he worked, the toxin, combined with their despairing words, began to seep past his defenses. "You can't save us. You're too late. You're giving us false hope. It only makes the pain worse when you fail." The last sentence, so eerily close to Batman's own words, struck him with the force of a punch. "This city will break you." Was this it? Was he failing? He felt a profound wave of weariness wash over him. His limbs felt heavy. The green lightning of One for All seemed to dim slightly. He saw his own reflection in a window, a tired, tear-streaked boy in a silly, torn costume, trying to hold back a tsunami of misery with his bare hands. For the first time since arriving in this world, a sliver of doubt, cold and sharp, pierced his heart. Maybe Batman was right. The thought was so horrifying, so alien, that it shocked him back to his senses. No. He would not give in. He would not let this poison win. He had evacuated almost everyone. Only a few people remained. He saw a man standing near the ventilation shaft, staring at it blankly. The source. He needed to clear the air. He ran to the center of the hall, planting his feet. He pulled his fist back, channeling One for All not into a destructive punch, but into a controlled, massive displacement of air. St. Louis. Smash! He punched upwards. A controlled cyclone erupted from his fist, a pillar of swirling wind that shot towards the ceiling. It struck the ventilation system, creating a powerful reverse suction. The cyclone acted like a giant vacuum, sucking the contaminated air up and out of the building. Then, using float, he shot to the windows, smashing them open with precise kicks, allowing fresh, clean air to rush in. The effect was almost immediate. Outside, people began to stir, shaking their heads as if waking from a nightmare. The fog of despair was lifting, leaving behind confusion and a lingering, phantom sadness. Izuku landed back on the floor, panting, his body aching with a weariness that was more than just physical. He had saved them. He had rescued every single person, but as he looked at the crowd of dazed, miserable people on the lawn, he didn't feel like a victor. He saw their faces, the hope he had been so proud to build now replaced by a hollow, chemical-induced emptiness. He hadn't just fought a villain tonight. He had fought the very concept of hope, and the battle had left a deep, undeniable wound on his soul. From his van, Jonathan Crane watched the green hero stumble out of the building, his shoulders slumped in a posture of defeat. He saw the doubt in the boy's eyes. Fascinating, Crane whispered to his recorder, a genuine, academic thrill in his voice. The subject is resilient. He can overcome the toxin's primary effect through sheer force of will. But the secondary effect, the psychological residue, is potent. He turned off his monitors. The experiment was a resounding success. He had found the first crack in the Emerald Hope's armor, and now, he knew exactly how to break it.